So welcome everybody to another discussion around money. And I want to start with a story. When I first started, when I went to an options trading course, the teacher in the course set aside 3 hours for us to watch a video. I think it was called Zeitgeist. And basically this video was highlighting that if you're going to play with money and be in the money field, you need to know a few certain things. And one of the things that he highlighted was how the Federal Reserve or money itself is a Ponzi scheme. And the other, I'm looking forward to Brendan and Alison having their goes at that. And Peter, I'm looking forward to your retort, of course. And the other thing that they pointed out, there's 4 topics. The 2 I can remember was the money. And the second one was how 9/11 had to be an inside job. All right. So let's start with Brendan, since he's having a good old laugh.
Oh, Jesus. I love this. And I'm going to reply in some way by digressing. For the last, let's call it 5,000 years, 99.99% of humanity has believed in God, gods, religion, spiritual world, etc., with precisely zero evidence. And that still applies today. And you now have something like 3,000 religions across the world where everyone swears they have the path to everlasting bliss and life, etc. Since the internet arrived, religion in developed countries is being replaced by conspiracy theories with equally little evidence. There are plenty of YouTube videos, there are plenty of Instagram, there are plenty of articles written with, and you guys know me at this stage, I'm skeptical about the world. I'm skeptical about organizations. I'm skeptical about human treatment of other humans, etc. I'm not cynical, and I look for evidence. And when you talk about, I'll talk about 2 things. I haven't studied 9/11. It's very unlikely to be an inside job. It was probably like the Israelis in Gaza at the moment. It's a function of incompetence that they didn't understand it in advance. But I'll grant you, I didn't study that. Money I know a little about. I have worked in the markets extensively throughout the 90s, etc. And I smile at the word Ponzi scheme when you look at money, because every human interaction is a Ponzi scheme. The definition of a Ponzi scheme means, am I actually selling something that someone else believes in? If you believe in it, you can complete a transaction. I'm going to sell you something on credit. That thing may be absolutely solid. It may be a house. It may be an ounce of pure gold. It may be the glass that I drink water from that's sitting in front of me at the moment. But it's based on the fact that for either a microsecond or a minute or an hour until you pay me, there's a credibility factor involved in that transaction. Money is that credibility factor. If you lose belief in the actual system, it all falls apart, and you can call it a Ponzi scheme. But all money is a mechanism to actually turn our belief in a transaction or a relationship into something concrete. So, you can go to all these courses, and like I've been to various others, but mainly what people are selling is their angle on the world. And most of it is absolute and utter garbage without evidence. Show me the evidence and I'll sign up. If you want to talk about conspiracy theories, I'm sorry, I'm going to look at you sideways.
Right. So one of the questions in regard to that, you're talking about money. Everything's a Ponzi scheme. The question is money like a house of cards? Is it going to come crashing down on us sometime in the future?
And look, and I'm conscious I'm talking to Sarah, I'll say this quickly and then I will actually shut up. It depends. If we lose confidence in money, yes, it will come down. It has come down in the past. We have left the gold standard for good reasons, and unless you understand economics, you won't understand that it was essential that we had to leave the gold standard. It was absolutely essential. You cannot have a gold standard in a modern, developed, internationalized, trading-based economy. It's impossible. So if
Come
we
on, Peter,
lose
what would
confidence,
you have to say about that?
yeah,
You shake your head
bullshit.
no.
That's why the economy. You're right when you're saying that people need to actually have faith in money, and where it actually comes from some standing. What's happening at the moment is the US dollar it's fucked. It's the only way to describe it. It's not worth anything. It's a bit like the Zimbabwe dollar when I was over there. It's the same. It's worthless, and people are starting to realize that, and it's because it is not backed by gold and silver. That is the problem that's happened. If it was backed by gold and silver, it'd be worth something. It's a tangible product.
Let me give you the basic economics here. Firstly, gold has zero intrinsic value. Zero intrinsic value. So therefore, all that we've done is we've looked at history, and because gold was a commodity that couldn't actually be alloyed, it was used as a mechanism to create valuable money. But gold in itself, until you had the modern economy and you've got a bit of gold and phones, etc., gold was absolutely useless for anything except jewelry. So it had zero intrinsic value, unlike wood, which you could use for fire, fuel, or building a house, or many, many other things. The second thing is, the gold standard is unutterable bollocks, because all you have to do is say that 1 ounce of gold is worth $1,000 today, and tomorrow I'm going to devalue it, so 1 ounce of gold is worth $2,000. So it's the exact same concept. Like, people have no idea about the gold standard. It never meant anything. It never meant anything. It was actually, and this is where I go with you, Peter, it was a conspiracy theory by the large economies that had central banks that developed by other names in the 19th century. So they could actually then collect gold, and they said to the rest of the world, backed up by military power, the French, the British, the Germans, then the Americans, the Russians, eventually the Japanese, etc. They said, we've got gold, and you can fuck off because your money is worthless. Ours is backed by gold. It wasn't backed by gold. It was backed by military power.
Very interesting. So you've said a lot of interesting things. I'll let Peter have another go, retort sorry, I'll let Peter have another say at Brendan down the track. But I want to get to Alison, because Alison says in the chat that you've actually studied 9/11 and you believe it was Central Intelligence. What did you write in the chat?
No, I haven't studied it, but I'm aware of a few accounts. And from what I'm aware of, 9/11 was definitely due to American intelligence failures, many of varying degrees over time, because they had a few pieces of information here, there, and everywhere. And because typical of large organizations, especially spook organizations, they tend not to talk to each other because knowledge is power. I'm going to keep it to me myself. I'm not going to share, because then I won't get my funding from government, for whatever reason, speaking of money. So they don't share the intelligence. And then what happens is that no one is actually putting all the pieces together. And therefore, 9/11 happened where all the various pieces of information were available. But because, left hand wasn't talking to the right hand, nobody had a full picture. That's my limited, from my limited knowledge, that's my understanding.
So I'll get back to you, but I just want to ask Brendan and Alison, you both believe it was Osama bin Laden was behind 9/11?
Look, for me, the balance of evidence is that, but I do say that I haven't studied it, but I haven't seen enough sources like WikiLeaks, etc. So those channels where you actually have insiders who provide information. When you look at the, Robert Kennedys and the David Ikes and all these fucking Egypts across the world who come up with the Holocaust didn't exist and everything is an inside job. I partly judge it on the wide range that I read and it is a wide range, and it does vary from the establishment to the anti-establishment. But what I've never ever seen is anything that I consider credible evidence for 9/11. But I do stress that to me, that's the balance of evidence. It's not definitive because I don't know.
Right. Okay. And you the same as well, Alison? You think it was Osama?
Well, again, from all that I know, which is not a lot because I haven't really looked into it to the same extent, but particularly, having had some kind of background with defence, I'm always interested in defence and in politics, living in Canberra as well. And it certainly seems to be that the Osama bin Laden and what were they called, Al Qaeda, were very definitely part of the catalyst behind it, or the whatever behind it. And so that's as best as I'm aware of.
And look, if I might add, which there's huge amount of sniffy stuff there. Clearly, this had nothing to do with Iraq. It had nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction. The guys who flew the planes were Saudis. Osama was from a very wealthy Saudi family and clearly had Saudi money behind him. The biggest sniffy thing that stands out a million miles is when all the flights were grounded after 9/11, that a lot of Saudi citizens were allowed to fly out of the country. So there is sniffy stuff there. There's no question there's sniffy stuff. But my tendency, and I say this because it's far from certain, is that what you had is rich people protecting other rich people that they had business deals with, that you didn't have the fucking Illuminati actually sitting in Liechtenstein going, let's press this button and we'll bring down the Twin Towers, and let's press that button and we'll drop the Great Wall of China. That stuff just irritates me, as you can tell.
Okay. Adrian put his hand up. Did you want to add something, Adrian?
Yes, I used to work for a multinational investigation company in Hong Kong and China, and our Philippines office raided a factory in Mindanao, which, if you know, is the Muslim island in the Philippines, in 1995. And inside the factory in 1995, they found plans for flying planes into tall buildings. Now, that certainly supports the idea that people of that persuasion and religion were involved. But the US has a great, almost like textbook practice of going into countries and siding with one side and financing, training them, supporting them, and helping them get what the US wants. That is their MO in South America, Africa, Middle East, Asia, where they topple dictators, where they topple communist regimes, or candidates that they can't control later in their mind, that they won't be able to control that politician. Now, that is just the US's MO. A lot of people have forgotten the UK Secret Service and their MO for doing things, and also Chinese espionage, also Indian espionage, Australian espionage. All of these things, they have persuasive techniques to do what their government cannot do in the open. It's just America is very hard at hiding it, because traditionally the American intelligence services are pretty crappy at learning foreign languages and infiltrating cultures where they can get in. So they have to outsource it to people who can speak the language, who don't really work for them. They work for the side they're supposed to be spying on. So they have a huge problem with double agents, whereas England and China, Vietnam also, specialize in training their intelligence in foreign languages and culture to the point where they can naturally be taken in as one of the local population. So, you know, they have better infiltration, and, you know, some of it is very overt intelligence gathering as well. So I think what's happening, just in listening to you, because, you know, some of the conspiracy theories are compelling, but I would argue to anyone just calling them a conspiracy theory, if it's true, it's no longer a conspiracy theory. You know, there's people telling the world that the planet is flat, you know, and putting up pictures of this and that. Now, that's on the ridiculous end of the argument. But and you have 9/11, which is you know, whenever it's something like that, like JFK, or, you know, you look at you remember the Challenger shuttle explosion?
Yeah.
Need
Now,
another 7 minutes.
there was no conspiracy theory about that in the same way that 9/11 or JFK.
There would be
or
today. The internet didn't exist back then.
Well, it didn't have to, because it wasn't a conspiracy. What the US government had done was get every state in America to contribute a part or production of the shuttle. And it's a great example of where you decentralize production failing. So every state contributed to that shuttle in one way or another with the engineering and production of the parts. And because it wasn't made in the same place, there were discrepancies. And that's why it failed. Now, no one said that. Now, that's not a conspiracy. That is negligence and best intentions for the country to say they all had a part in it, every state, going wrong, best intentions failing, and no malice. And you look at the where the conspiracy thing comes into, I think you'll find in most cases it's because someone important doesn't die, where it's only fucking collateral damage civilians in every single case. When it's someone important that dies, or something of importance and personal property to someone important, then there's a big investigation about it. But if it's just normal people, they don't give a shit, because that's less people on welfare. That's less people in hospitals if they're dead. They don't give a shit. It's the same old game. Send them to the front line. So I think what we're seeing now, and with the internet, and that's why they control the internet, because it's like controlling the telephones, it's like controlling the jungle telegraph. What leg do people have to stand on? You know, I've seen 3 things this week in, let's just say, social media. One, the guy in Australia putting the list of empty houses people can go and squat. And I've seen both sides of that story. And I've also seen someone give you very good advice in how to pull that off and squat in an unoccupied premises. And one of the best things she says is make sure you have other people with you, because you have to remain on site 24 hours a day to maintain possession of the property. And also, small footnote, you need to be on site for 12 years for it to be approved. So, you know, it's not something that's going to happen over a month, even if you're cutting the lawn. The other thing is in America, and I would say people could probably say this in Australia too, people in tears who are in their 20s, no kids, not living in a big place, and having to hold down 3 jobs and still can't afford the rent. Now, there is something wrong. That's something wrong with America, but that's something wrong around the world right now. And you've got single parents with dependents, male and female, with kids, that are trying to do 3 jobs to stay alive. Now that is wrong. And
Now,
what is everybody doing about it?
Can I follow that, Adrian? And again, pardon me, I know that I'm talking a lot this week, but I fully agree with that. And I mentioned last week, and it is something that I'm paying a lot of attention to at the moment, is that we really have to wake up to the fact that that period of time post World War II, that democratized societies, that actually increased living standards for the lower classes hugely, that allowed people to buy a house with a normal wage and educate their children and actually save for retirement. From 1950 to the GFC, 2008, 2009, there was pretty much a trend upwards all the way. Now, that trend to me started being attacked by Reagan and Thatcher in the 1980s. And I was absolutely there as a young, newly qualified accountant at the time. And I didn't understand it. And I'm not going to claim that I understand it in fine detail now. But that neoliberal kind of the markets are always right approach is my view of what the conspiracy theory really is. When you look at from Murdoch, who is the most insidious, evil, effective human being in the world to repress and oppress and exclude the average person, Murdoch and his network really became the mouthpiece for the rich. And I'm not talking about the rich who earn $500,000 a year or even $1 million a year. I'm talking about the rich who actually control assets. And now I am not the dumbest guy on the planet. I'm not the smartest, but I'm not the dumbest. I cannot for the life of me over the last 10 years understand how house prices go up and up and up and up and up and up, because I understand how cash flows work until it twigged that all you have is you've the people with enormous amount of resources and cash continually buying assets. So they started at the very top and they bought the most expensive assets, and then they're buying the next level of assets, and now they're buying up all the assets. And because you have equally governments who have fallen in line with this approach, neoliberal governments across the Western world, they wanted to keep interest rates down, which means the cost of buying something stays down, but it means asset prices go up. And they've kept wages down. They've kept taxes high for the average person and low for the rich person. That's the true conspiracy. And that's why asset prices are going up and up and up. And it means that those 20 somethings you refer to, Adrian, I had always believed that the cycle would go round and things would change. I'm not convinced anymore.
No.
Until you have, sorry, Paul, going back to your very first comment about the Ponzi scheme. If you have enough people who lose confidence, it does fall apart. And you get the French Revolution, which was probably the most incredible event in modern Western history when you really, really think about it. That you had a population in France at the time, which was probably 20 to 30 million people controlled by a couple of thousand. And they were so starved and so excluded, and they'd lost a couple of wars. And that's a big thing that really doesn't come in. It was before Napoleon, but they had lost the major wars with the British in the second half of the 18th century. And your average peasant and your average kind of sewer dweller, because homelessness was the natural thing in France at the time. Eventually they said, that's it, we can't eat. And when you can't eat, you either fight or die. And human beings will fight. Now, we're not at that stage, but those
We're
signs
heading
for the
to that
first time of my
stage.
lifetime.
We are very.
We're not at that stage.
Close. We're very
and sorry,
close.
I'm doing a Khrushchev on it now. We're not at that stage because too many people are believing the bullshit that comes out of the establishment, that the conspiracy theories are real. And that's being used for Brexit. It's being used for Trump voters. It's being used across the world to actually manipulate the average person into believing that Trump has their back. The opposite is true.
The US is the US. I think what happened in Australia when they had this guy telling people to go and squat in unoccupied dwellings and premises, then they had it on the news, and it was a very Marie Antoinette moment that has hit TikTok big time, with the news presenter saying and giggling almost with the tone of let them eat cake. Oh, what do you mean? People are like camping in houses with no electricity? That was the let them eat cake moment that went viral, showing that these people are out of touch. And I have to say something about Murdoch. You don't ever believe that that is a news organization.
No,
He
it's a
only
propaganda organization.
yes, no, it's an entertainment company, and he corrupted journalism to make it an entertainment company to compete with Hollywood, which he didn't own. And calling News Corp and Murdoch and any of those journalistic companies is naive as calling the NRL a true sport. Okay, because that was contrived as well as entertainment, and that is not a sport. That is a coliseum.
Okay,
And it was
again,
invented as a
I'm
coliseum.
I got to jump in because I love what you're saying, Adrian. I think you're 100% right. Don't know if you know the term pan et circenses, bread and circuses.
Yes,
the Romans did it,
Stalin.
and it was an absolute strategy. The Roman society was built on the patricians sitting on top of the plebeians. There is no difference today, except what we have is we have built up. Let's look at Australia. Superannuation was actually an incredibly brilliant thing to do. And I can say that as a non-Australian born individual, because it actually created a safety net for people, not just financially, but emotionally. So the people who started working in the 80s when superannuation first came in, they knew that their retirement was going to be looked after. That means they're going to be emotionally stable, financially okay, but it also means that they're going to be compliant. That's why we're not at the front. We are not living in sewers. The number of homeless people in Australia is appalling. It shouldn't be one, but it doesn't measure up to anything that created the conditions for the French Revolution. And the Russian Revolution was different, but not that
think
different.
Brendan, I know where you are. You're in Western Australia, but we are I'm surrounded and travel through lots of different suburbs, and I see what is happening. It is truly bread and circuses, and I can see what is happening, that there are a lot of property owners that have more than one property. They cannot finance those. They are bailing out and selling them, because, as Paul pointed out, the last year, the price of repayments is 70,000 a year. So some of them cannot do that. But I honestly think we are very close to seeing in a lot of sectors Middle Ages, medieval levels of regard for humanity.
Look, I think when the gap between the haves and the have-nots gets too big, that's when we have a revolution. They have that in America as well. The current constitution is based on the revolution of the colonies against the British. I just want to get Alison keep saying Murdoch should be tried for treason. Yeah, come on, give us your feedback.
For crimes against humanity, because as Adrian and Brendan have said so rightly, he's completely amoral. It's all about money and power, and not necessarily in that order. I think it's probably power and money. That's why he's propped up governments, he's installed governments, and then when he feels like it, he withdraws his support, as Trump found out, right? And so it's all about him. He won't even freaking let go, even though he's supposedly retired. He's still holding on to power. I just wonder about, God, what are you doing? Murdoch, Putin, Trump, get rid of them all. Sorry, Peter, if I'm, stepping on your sensitivities for your beliefs.
They're not doing anything out of order for people in their position and genotype.
No, they're not unique. They're not.
They're
just a function of their time.
doing what Titans do. Okay,
Yeah.
but the world is not made for those people to exist anymore. We have
But,
much
okay,
more valuable people.
you go back to the 60s and using Britain as an example. And again, I know that the circumstances weren't enormously different in Australia, but I'm more familiar with what happened in Britain when the top rate of tax was up at 90% plus. Now, that clearly is going too far in the other direction. And you had massive dislocation as a result of it. And one of the results was the growth of conservatism, and that got to Thatcher in 1979. But what it actually did as well is it did redistribute wealth. I've said this before. The best way to become a millionaire or a billionaire is to have rich parents. And for them to have rich parents, and for them in the Britain and England in particular, if their parents or their ancestors came across William the Conqueror, you really have a good shot at being very, very wealthy. Inherited wealth is the main source of wealth across the world, unless you have redistribution. Now, I don't want someone to come in and take my $2, but if I've got $2 billion and I've got homeless people down the road, does society sit back and wait for the homeless person to actually die, or enough of them to actually come in and to create a revolution? Or does society actually try and say together, well, you know what, the guy with $1 billion, that's not really right. And Murdoch is actually, he is most culpable for saying that the guy with the $1 billion is helping the guy with the homeless situation, whereas the exact opposite is true.
What I want to do now is, Brendan, you've mentioned about, what's his name, David Icke, all of these people that propagate this conspiracy theory garbage. What's your view on Julian Assange? Because I tell you what, I think Julian Assange has, and I'm going to start with Peter first, because Peter hasn't said anything for a while. And then we'll get on to Brendan.
I haven't even got into I haven't even had a chance to respond to the 9/11.
And you can respond to the 9/11 as well.
Apologies, Peter. I am over the top this week. My apologies.
No, it's good. You're passionate. We want the passion. That's what we want to come through.
Being out of the construction industry, I'm in the building industry, right? Buildings, let's just say this much. Buildings do not just collapse like that, especially that building 5 or whatever it was that went down 2 or 3 days later, just to drop down like that, which they were all fully insured, by the way. It's just how many or conspiracy theories, how many incidents and things you have to have until it becomes too much of a coincidence before you think, well, maybe something was not there meant to be. You know, some things. I'm saying definitely that my thoughts are that 9/11 was an inside job. It's just very convenient that they couldn't find anything, but they managed to find the guy's passport, didn't they? They found one of the hijackers' passport. Come on, give me a fucking break. How, like, there was nothing left of the building. How can they find a passport from the guy who happened to be riding the plane? Come on. That is just ridiculous. And for any of us to believe that is just, to me, it's beyond nonsense. I can't get my head around thinking that a guy's passport could manage to survive that. Come on. Let's get real.
And don't forget the attack on the Pentagon, where
that was definitely a missile. Couldn't a plane that size couldn't have caused the damage.
Right,
and plane of that size couldn't have fit through the hole in the Pentagon. It was so simple. It's proven on that. You have a look. There's loads of things. What also wasn't mentioned was all the gold at the bottom of the Twin Towers that went sort of missing in action. Anybody heard anything about that?
I prefer to get off this because there's no evidence for any of it. None. You know, we're talking about market manipulation, and that manipulated the markets for sure. But I think you could have a complete session on 9/11, and I'm going to remain neutral in that I don't know one way and I don't know the other way, and I want to see evidence before I actually say. But I have not seen anything that I'd consider forensic. There's lots of, come on, it can't happen. Well, I'll tell you mathematically, it's possible to toss 100 heads in a row It's unlikely, but it's bloody well possible.
Look, Brendan, I think what Peter was saying is my wife used to work for a company called Tata, which is actually the French army. And she used to work in the engineering division. And the engineers, they're all army. So they're all, yep, it was Osama bin Laden. But they came back and said exactly what Peter said. It's impossible for a building to fall down on its structure the way it did. It was just impossible. So I think one of the things about 9/11 is there's a lot has been said about it. There's a lot of evidence. You can see explosions going up and down. But I agree. Let's move on from that 7/11 and let's get on to the next important one. Is
7-Eleven or 9/11?
Yeah.
9/11.
Yes, let's go to the 7-Eleven and get a beer. And do you know, Peter, I want to ask Peter and Brendan just before we go. Do you remember growing up and watching TV in the 80s? There was a show on Saturday nights called That's Incredible.
Yeah.
And one of the segments they had almost every week for a period of time was in America, this company that specialized in demolition of tall buildings by making them collapse on top of themselves so that they didn't damage the buildings around them. And I can remember clear as day watching that as a kid before the age of like maybe before 14 or something. So maybe 11 or 12. And so we're talking the very early 80s, okay? And they had full video coverage and they were experts in it. It didn't matter what building it was, they went in and they made it collapse on top of itself exactly how the World Trade Centers fell down.
Controlled demolition, it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are they called?
And you see it all the time. It's not just 97.
Yeah, but
Controlled demolition.
So they've been doing that for years in America, especially for that show. Then it all went quiet. You never saw any videos of it anymore. Kept it really quiet. You didn't see people advertising they could do that or anything. Now,
look,
you know,
that's all interesting. That's not evidence. Get me some structural engineering reports that say that it couldn't have happened based on the plane crashes. No, there aren't structural engineering reports.
I think
that's literally what my wife was. She's a structural engineer.
But that's like diagnosing Trump as being a lulab, watching him on TV. That doesn't count. That may convince certain people that he is or he isn't, but you need forensic professionals to actually examine and report, and you need multiple independent sources. So I'm not arguing one way or the other. I'm saying the conspiracy theories usually come from sources that I go, yeah, right.
Has any other country used their intelligence organization or their equivalent of the CIA to do anything similar to what we've seen in America in terms of assassinations of presidents, bombings of their foreign embassies in countries where things aren't going their way, 9/11, all the other things?
The British have been doing it for 250 years.
Who?
Until the Americans took over.
So why can't
the British did whatever the hell? And in fairness, so did the French, so did the Spanish at different times. The Russians do it to some extent, but in parts of the world, they're doing it at the moment in the Sahel and the Southern Sahara, and it's not getting much publicity at all because we're so obsessed with certain things in the West, we're not paying attention. So does anybody know what's going on in Mali at the moment or Niger? The Russians are fomenting, they're fomenting complete and utter chaos in those countries. And it's getting
there's
no
a war
publicity.
in Congo that's been going on for decades. But there
And,
gets no media report because
no, about 5 million people have died. There's a war going on in Ethiopia, which is genocide and which is worse than Gaza right now.
yeah, because there's no benefit to the West for that, right?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. So it does come down to the manipulation of the markets. Events happen. I know you hate Bitcoin, Brandon, but I do remember my brother ringing me up last year and saying, Paul, you've got to get into Bitcoin because Elon Musk has endorsed it and you can buy Tesla with Bitcoin. And
yeah, Elon Musk, there's a trustworthy human being.
Hey, don't you go against those South Africans, mate.
He's a fuckwit. He's a genius, but he is a fuckwit. And he's as manipulative. So he bought Twitter for free speech and he shuts down anybody who criticizes him. End of. That's hypocrisy.
That's
Come on, Peter,
just,
what do you have to
that
say?
is that's just a commercial version of it's my ball, fuck off, I'm taking it home.
But
That's
you
all it is.
lose trust. So
Of course you
if you
do,
wanted,
but someone can invent another Twitter. I mean, that's the
oh
whole
yeah.
game.
He's
you
already
know?
lost $20 billion or $30 billion on it, which
Yeah.
obviously to him isn't that big a deal. But he is not someone that I would have a lot of faith in. Musk, look, what is the ultimate arrogance and the ultimate stupidity than saying, let's go colonize Mars, when we have a perfectly good, humanly habitable planet that needs a little bit of care and attention and is perfect for human beings? You know what? We actually evolved on this planet compared to some fucking dry carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide atmospheric situation like Mars, which is just, okay, why don't we actually send 4 people to live at the South Pole without any support for the next 100 years and see how they get on? And that's better than Mars. That's stupidity, is just blind arrogance. If I say stuff, people believe it.
It's in the Matrix. They say in the Matrix, human beings are a virus. They go from one thing to another and suck the life out of every resource and move on to another host. And that's exactly what going to Mars is. It's humans, unless humans are enlightened to some extent to care for the fellow man and beings, we are fucked. And
if human beings
are
are enlightened,
person to say that, and it's certainly not my words. But you know,
if we have enlightened leadership, then you get someone like Putin, Trump, Johnson, or an immense number of other garbage people: Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini.
Opportunists.
All of them come out of the woodwork.
It's just what
they'll win. They'll win.
It's what capable people do. They take advantage of weaker people, and it's a human nature that unfortunately some people exploit. And you know, if they exploit it too much, they get a pitchfork up the ass or a bullet in the head. You know, it's just how it works. They can't go anywhere, otherwise they end up like the character in 1984, and they're hidden behind a wall and a screen, the Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain, which they don't want. They have to go out, and when they go out, someone gets rid of them. And quite often it's their own people that do it. It's just, we need a better solution. And I think, you know, this is a great, what do you call this, by the way, Paul? What do you call this group?
Market manipulation.
No, our group.
I haven't actually, it's just
a
discussion about money.
That's why when I put it on my show, I call it the webinars of mass discussion. And I think this one, you got to send this to me, because I'm going to play this on Anzac Day in 2 weeks' time, because we're really, really touching some stuff here. I want to thank you all. I've never wanted to hug 4 people so badly as you 4.
All right. I think with that, we'll leave it there. We covered a few topics. We could keep going all day. There's been a lot of passion from everybody, which has been awesome. I would have liked Peter to have
I'm happy to have a quick say to finish off.
Yeah,
for sure.
you can have a quick
Look,
say, but Brendan, no
we-
interrupting this time.
We've been fed lies and bullshit all of our lives, all right? And it is courtesy of people like Mr. Murdoch. And the thing is, they own everything. The fuckers own everything. This is the thing. And we are fed lies and bullshit. And you know what? When it comes down to wars and all this and that, you know who wins writes the history. You know, do you know where I'm coming from? Like I say, I don't believe all the shit we've been living in. I don't believe it all. You know, I look at they say, right, okay, we talked. Someone mentioned about the flat Earth before and the round Earth, right? Okay, I'm not saying the world's flat, but I'll tell you what, it makes more evidence than the spinning ball bullshit. All right, it just makes a lot of sense, more sense to be in a flat Earth. The water is definitely flat. It is there level 100%. They say the Earth curves using their theories, right? The Earth's curves. You shouldn't be able to see one point of land that's 1,000 miles away that way, but you can straight across the water. And if with their curvature, using their beliefs, it couldn't. It's meant to go like that. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying the world is definitely flat, but it makes more sense than the spinning ball bullshit. That's all I'll say.
Okay, well, we won't get
I
onto
think we
the
have to
flat Earth.
discuss that next week. That is going to be fun.
We can
Oh, yeah.
discuss. We can discuss it.
Yes.
I mean, no, I don't know. I look out and I can definitely see a curve on the ocean. So, but that's just me personally. So I want to thank everybody
look up
for
parallax.
the
Just
reflections.
look up
What?
parallax. All right.
Yeah.
Look up
I just
parallax.
want a last word from Alison as well, because Alison's been throwing a lot into the chat, and you know, she's been passionate as well. But Brendan's been very passionate today, and Adrian.
Yeah, I would just want to come on and say that I don't know a lot about money and economics and what have you, but I love coming on to this forum, this panel, because everyone is so passionate and everyone generally has some background to what they're talking about. And Brennan, you're just a master. You're just the master of everything as far as I'm concerned. I have a crush on you, I think, in a way. Yeah, an intellectual crush. And I just love that you know so much about history and economics and how it all fits together. And I just love being on here. I come here to learn more than anything else, I think, and I learn a lot, including about myself. So thank you, Paul, for having this fabulous forum. And now you've had my true confession.
Okay, well, look, before we get down another rabbit hole of a topic, thank you, everybody, for participating today. And yeah, maybe next week we'll talk about the flat Earth.